Historically, the River Foss, along with the Ouse, was part of the defensive network that surrounded York. However, with the reduction of warfare, the role of the river changed to a more commercial setup. In 1736, a well-respected York surgeon called Francis Drake wrote a book called The History and Antiquities of the City of York. He suggested that the foss, if properly drained and cleaned, could be used for transporting lime and coal to the towns of Easingwold, Malton and York, and bringing agricultural produce out.
However, it wasn't until 60 years later, in 1790, a new business called the Foss Navigation Company was formed. In the same year, the old Humber Bridge at Strensall was built, and the original stone Blue Bridge was upgraded with a larger wooden swing bridge to allow boats to reach Castle Mills Lock. In 1792, the Foss Navigation Company failed to get an Act of Parliament through, which would have given them the power to begin construction of the canal. However, in 1793 they did. This now gave the company the power and authority to purchase lands, tenements and properties, and to make and maintain a navigable communication for boats, barges and other vessels, from the junction of the rivers Foss and Ouse to Stillington Mill. In 1794, work began in the city of York. The Castle Mills Lock was constructed, Wormwood's Cut was dug, and the navigation was open to Monk Bridge by December of that year. During 1795, the work on cutting and building of locks, lockkeepers' cottages and bridges was carried out as far as Strensall. Although surveyed by the distinguished engineer William Jessup, much of the actual work by the company's engineer, Mr. Moon, was not satisfactory, and he was dismissed.
You're fine.
This was a result of a report by John Rennie, another famous engineer, but he would not stay to supervise the work himself. So a new engineer called Mr. Scruton was employed to oversee the construction of the reservoir between 1796 and 1797, where Pond Head was dammed to become Oulston Reservoir. During this period, he also oversaw the construction of 2 locks to provide water flow during the dry summer months, and the canal bridge at Strensall. The company raised $25,400 of its capital, plus another $10,000 to build the canal to Sheriff Hutton. However, by 1798, this was mostly spent. Therefore, an amending act was passed in 1801 to raise an additional $10,000, which proved successful.
At this point, an argument arose as to how this would be spent, whether to route the canal following the course of the river between Strensall and Sheriff Hutton Bridge, or cut it across country. The cut was shorter, however it was more expensive. The committee of the company decided on the canal cut, resulting in them running out of money again. In 1802, all work ceased, preventing the canal being built as far as Stillington. It now terminated at a basin west of Sheriff Hutton Bridge. In 1805, the entire navigation was opened, however it was already showing signs of not being a financial success. The company attempted to raise more money by issuing shares costing £500, with major shareholders being the Mayor and the Commonalty of York. There is evidence showing dividends were only paid in 1810 and 1811, with a total return of £9 per 100 being paid. The trouble was, the company's only source of income was from tonnage fees and rents. They were not allowed to act as common carriers, therefore being entirely dependent on users finding the canal commercially viable. Barges were better than a horse and cart, as they could carry up to 50 tons being drawn by one horse. In the 1840s, with the rise of the railways, this proved to be the final nail in the coffin for the canal. The railways could carry more weight, quicker and cheaper. In 1852, the last barge left Strensall to the terminus at Sheriff Hutton, and so ended the Foss Navigation Company, which in 1853 was purchased for £4,000 by the York Corporation, thus earning the dubious reputation of being the first navigation to succumb to competition from the railways. It's sad in a way, had they built it 60 years earlier, it would have been a commercial success. Eventually the railways would still have overtaken the canals for transport of commercial goods, but but it's quite possible that it would have still been in use today for leisure purposes.